super long day, and I have approval from the conference rulers to truncate this panel a little, because I feel like we've got 4 panelists, which is almost half of what we've had on other panels, and we have a smaller group. So I think, as I said in my effort to make a not so awkward transition from the last incredible, or like Mel was saying, we paneled the fuck out of that panel, didn't we? It was, and we did that all as a group, and it was an amazing, deep experience. And so now it's like we're just gonna lift up, because to me, and I feel like it'd be really nice to hear some counterpoints, but I feel like one of the things that I love about drag is its fakery. You know, it's fakery. Yeah, I love that it gives us, that it allows us to try things on. You know, it's like I'm not, without saying this is who I am forever and a day, and so I can try this on, I can put this on, and I can parade this around, and then I can take it off if I want, and I can change it again next week. And I think there's something essentially queer about that, about the transformations that we can go through, and that we don't have to be stuck, you know, and because identity is sticky, right? It sticks to us, and it's very hard to loose it sometimes. But the fact is that we all change, and we're transforming all the time, and that we have to allow ourselves to play. And this is where the beautiful intersection of theater and queer kind of like starts in some ways. You know what I mean? It could be a kind of like I don't like to think start's the wrong word. I'm taking that one back right now. But it's a good vortex with which I think to talk about. And so the question that we were tasked with, but of course I'm going to change that too, but is like, what can we learn from drag now? And I think it's more like, how can drag make us think, let's say. That's not big enough, we can work on it. Super important. I feel really, really happy that the 4 recommendations of the QTIBPOC are there. QT, but what did you phrase it as a, sorry?
QTBOC.
QTBOC. Are here for us because we need to keep them close to our hearts in these conversations. I think especially when it comes to the playful territory of trying on, I think is super important, because that when we are trying these things on, we have to watch what we're grabbing onto and what we're appropriating even as we do it, you know. So maintaining that, and also acknowledging the ground upon which we stand, and thanking the ancestors. I still feel so emotional from that last thing. Like, I still feel so emotional from it. So it's an interesting place where we're coming from. Now, we have 4 panelists. We are going to stick to our 7 minutes, okay? Who wants to start? Jorge. Okay. Because we're all such dramatic people. I am going to get my phone and time us. Please, Jorge, give us an introduction of yourself.
Now, yes, my name is Jorge. So, here's this, my name. And I want to make it really short, because then, yes, it was very emotional what we passed through, so then I don't want to trivialize my topic, because for me it's a very important topic. So I just want to go to the point and try to explain a little bit my research. And then I'm coming from a space where I'm a designer, costume designer, theater scenographer, and I'm very interested in the production of the space. So I'm very interested in the scenographic point of view of the space. But also, as a costume designer, I have been very much interested in the space of the body, and the space of the body as a theatrical space. So the theatrical event, which is drag in this instance, so then it's how to evolve and how it works in the everyday, in the ambit of the everyday. Because I think theater is based on the everyday. So then this kind of a binary, so then it always comes in and out, so inside and outside. So you cannot make a line between the everyday and the theater. So then they're all so connected. So then my research is related to the theater of the everyday, to the ambit of the everyday, to the kind of instances that make it theatrical on the everyday. And also, something that I discovered through my research is that what I do, I realize that now we cannot really research or think about like heteronormativity or any kind of normativity, because we don't like kind of base ourselves on that old binary. So there are a whole bunch of new masculinities and femininities. And then we have to think from that point of view. Because I, like, whenever I'm reading, and I like read of heteronormativity, so then I just have to read it very cautiously, because then I don't go by that. So then I'm trying to find my own masculinity. I'm trying to find the new femininity and how drag is helping us, just kind of in the ambit of the everyday, to explore that new theatricality, to explore that new way to express ourselves. So my research is about this exploration through costuming. And dress has been always like through history. So I was going to read that, but I'm talking so, like through history, we have always like used dress as knowledge and power. So the moment, and they use it in like the strategies of torture, so they use dress as a mean of humanizing someone or dehumanizing someone. So when we do theater, so we do the same thing. So we humanize or dehumanize a character. So then in my case study, it's about like these fans of the football games and how they kind of humanize themselves in a way that they connect to the team, they connect to the field, they connect to this masculinity that is the masculine capital gained and granted just by the fact that they are this orthodox kind of masculinity, this powerhouse on the field. And because we are outsiders, so we are trying to kind of subjugate towards that masculinity. So a way to do it is just to kind of play it, to perform it. Mm-hmm. And then I guess we all kind of identify with that kind of urge to perform. So nowadays we do it every day. So we open our phone, we go on Facebook, and then we perform. And we want to see what the others perform. So then this binary is very, very real in the sense that we want to see, but we want to be seen. We are audience and we are performers at the same time. So then this kind of a performance of the self is just going. And then we do it through the space, the virtual space, we do it through our bodies. When we kind of invent ourselves this identity, it's like, oh, my name is Mary, and then here we are when the name is totally different, the identity is totally different, so we're performing, we perform the self. So then through costuming, and in this, the case study, so then these men, so what they do is they subjugate, they drag themselves to kind of submit to their orthodox masculinity. So all this performance, I think is very interesting because we use it in the everyday, we use it in theater, we use it for to try to identify our queerness, to try to define our queerness. So queer is not anymore the idea of dragging ourselves or being feminine or being kind of a different person. Queer is to identify yourself the way you want to be. So then my research is not just about the costuming of the self, it's about finding this identity, this new masculinity or this new femininity through the costuming. So whether it's the everyday or on the stage, traditional costuming. So, and then that's it.
give us a kind of quick few words about to contextualize that image just a
Yes.
little bit for people who might not have
So,
read the paper?
like, for the ones that are not in, that they don't know what happens outside the Mosaic Arena in Saskatchewan. Regina has the biggest fan base in the whole country. So then they are, the fans of the Rough Riders are the biggest fan base of the whole Canada. And then what they do is like, we don't have the tailgate parties as they do in the States, but we do have these costume parties when everybody goes and dresses in the colors of the team. So a lot of them, they dress with like these like kind of a feminine costumes, and it's very popular, like the Hawaiian skirt with the watermelon, and then even they have these headdresses that are also watermelons. So at some point they just kind of adopted the watermelon as the element. It's like coconuts or like the watermelon as a bra, and then they use it. And because one of my points is that because they are men, because they both gays, so this masculine capital is granted already. So then they can dress as they want. They can have high heels. They can have makeup. They can have whatever. I live 2 blocks away from that stadium, and if I would go on high heels with a like skirt, Hawaiian skirt, coconut bra, and everything, I would totally get a different treatment because I'm not a fan. I'm just a drag queen, like passing by, a fan, just like in women's clothes, a cross dresser. So I don't have that masculine capital that they already have. Yeah. So then this is what I'm doing, and that's why like this picture is like to me.
Great, thank you so much. Because I know not everybody had time to read the paper, so that's an important element. Thank you so much, Jorge.
You're welcome.
Shall we start with one of the Camerons? We have 2 Camerons, not even a common name.
Yes, let's start with me. So I am a drag performer, but I'm a theater artist as well, and I get very intimidated by academia, so I'm going to put that out there that I'm actually quite nervous about speaking. Dragging the past into the future. So talking about from where I come from, first of all, to put myself in context. I grew up in South Africa, and I find it's very interesting that you're talking about the masculinity of this, because I found that as well in South Africa, that my family would have these parties where the men would dress up in drag, and in this weird, bizarre drag as well. Our Picture Show was the first movie I remember seeing at 3, and my entire family were all on board with watching it and celebrating it and singing together. But then they had a problem with me coming out at 15, so bizarre. I also grew up in an incredibly masculine world of sport, and have always been conscientious of my femininity and how soft I am as a man, but still needing to find my space in that. So that's a little bit of a preamble. I graduated from theater school, and there's no work for directors. And I haven't started my theater company yet. And David and I have been living in Toronto, and we were going out to see drag a lot. David loved drag before that, and I was indifferent to it. And seeing Michelle Ross in Toronto, from those of you who are from Toronto and know her, with a tear running down her face as she connects to the song. She would always give a little nod upwards, and it's interesting that you say fakery, because for me it's not. It's actually it's the most honest I think I can be is when I have the safety of the mask on top of me. And I've always said it is Cameron. She's just all the boy bits sort of filtered out, so it's all femininity coming out. And so I fell in love with drag in Toronto, and then we moved here, and I was really not pleased with what I was seeing. And rather than just being the bitchy grump in the back that was saying I don't like this stuff, I thought, well, why don't I actually participate in this world and then bring what I want to see to the stage? So I started, and I've always been drawn to powerful women as well. So I don't know what drag teaches. I can't speak to that. I can only really talk to myself as a performer. So I really actually came to this panel with questions. So I've got a couple clips that I want to show, and then I want to ask my questions. So give me a second. Sarah. This is one of the songs Michelle Ross does as well. So we'll just stop there. You can find this on YouTube. Or find me on Wednesdays at, hang on. No, we don't want that one. We want this one. For those of you who were at my show this past Wednesday, you'll remember this one.
Don't forget to write me when you get there in your rowboats. Then you paddle across the sea without me.
Always great.
Easiest dining.
Okay, so there's that. Going to get 7 minutes fast here. And then I won Entertainer of the Year in Vancouver in 2012. This was my winning performance. I had 9 backup chorus members. Just bring us to the climax.
Please.
How am I doing for time?
I think we have a minute left.
Great. So you get the picture. Eventually, they actually carry me out because I'm experiencing the spirit. So where we're at right now in this community, obviously, is that we're starting to talk about appropriation a lot, and all of these songs, the songs that I think are like the closest to my heart and the ones that I connect to and perform to, are all sung by Black women. And I bring to the table this question of appropriation, and I want to talk about it in an open forum with people who don't know me. So there's less actual, there's less pandering to me as your friend or as a person that, I don't know, has any power in the situation. So that's what I want us to actually start discussing once my 7 minutes is up, is those questions. Thank you.
Ray, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ray. I am a queer, non-binary, mixed-race drag artist. My drag name is Rose Butch. And my drag is non-binary. So I had the experience, my first encounters, I guess, with drag were within the context of theater. I went to one of those high schools where there weren't enough boys that wanted to be in the drama program, so I did a lot of cross-dressing. Then I came out, and when I went to theater school, I had the experience of going to theater school as an actor, And then coming out to the faculty as non-binary about halfway through my training, and the reaction was that I would not be able to have a career as an actor as someone that was not of a binary gender. So my reaction to that was going into a stream at the school where I could learn how to make the theater that I wanted to see. So I studied design, stage management, all that sort of thing. And then when I got out of theater school, it wasn't doing it for me. So I tried out drag. And the first time that I thought that I could do drag that was expressive of my gender was seeing videos of, there's a competition that Cameron runs in Vancouver called the Whip Day, called the Mr. Miss Cobalt competition, and oh yeah, please. The 2013 winner is a trans man named Tranopus Rex who performed topless, and I was just like, their winning performance was to, oh yeah, that's me, that's Rose Butch, was to Dancing on My Own by Robin, and I was just like, oh my god, this is what I want to do. And so this is the drag that I do. So the drag that I do, I describe as hard femme glitter dandy. So it's a meeting of everything, and I call myself a drag thing, rather than being a drag queen or a drag king. When I first started doing drag, I was identifying as drag king, because that's the culture that I came up in. It was a drag king show called Man Up. But eventually, as I got more into discovering different aspects of drag, I was like, oh, I want to do something different. And I don't want to be working within the confines of what is a drag queen, what is a drag king. So I started calling myself a drag thing, and this is what I do. In my statement, I mentioned that being openly gender variant in the surprisingly gendered world of drag has been super valuable because it's allowed me to connect with other folks that are also gender variant or who know gender variant people, and they're not quite sure what to do. I think that I live in a queer bubble where everyone I know knows about the they pronoun, and they already know about non-binary genders, but I'm always shocked when I realize that there are folks out there who have no idea about it. So it has been valuable in that I'm not allowed, but I'm able to connect with other people. It's also, I didn't mention this, it's also quite frustrating, because as someone who experiences misogyny in my everyday life, I experience misogyny in drag as well, and that's maybe when I get the most inappropriate comments about my body and about my presentation is when I'm in drag. People coming up to me saying, oh my god, I had to ask my friend if you were actually a girl. And that's completely inappropriate. I got a remark the other day on the street that was like, I'm so glad that girls are doing drag. And it's just come on, get a clue. So there is still that gendered, almost heteronormative, drag is only men dressing up as women. I think that drag is so much more beyond that. My best friend is a non-binary woman who does drag as a queen, and she is the current, I won this competition in 2015, and she's the 2016 winner, and I think that what she does is incredible. I think that the future of drag is just as gender diverse as people are, and I think that coming into drag as a trans person was a completely unique outlet for gender expression, and I think that more folks that are non-binary can connect with drag in the same way that I have, and that's where it's heading.
Mm-hmm. Great. Cameron number two.
I'm Cameron number 2. My name's Cameron Crookston, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto. I'm in the theater and also sexual diversity department, and I study drag. And particularly, I look at drag's relationship to the past, and the idea of nostalgia mixing with cultural memory, and drag as a performance of the past. So the question was pretty on point. It didn't have to go too far to think about this. I brought a thing, I'm going to read it. In my paper, I talk about drag mothers, and I interviewed 5 queens from across Canada who identify as either a drag mother, a drag daughter, and in many cases both. So I spoke to, in Halifax, I spoke to El Noir. In Toronto, I spoke to Lucy Flawless, Demand Attention, and Fahrenheit, which is Farah and Height. And in Vancouver, I spoke to Ray Sunshine, who's an old friend of mine. And it's really amazing for me to be here, actually, because I was first exposed to drag at the Odyssey. I lived here for 5 years in my early 20s, so there's something very synchronistic about coming back here to talk about this. Drag is a really interesting part of queer culture because of its use of the past, and scholars like Heather Love and Scott Braverman have talked about the fact that queer culture in general has a really hard time with the past, both literal histories and just the past as a psychic space and a concept. And there's a couple of reasons for this. There's actually lots of reasons for this, but I'll try and keep it short. Elena Kramer, who was on the first history panel, mentioned the idea, and this comes up a lot in my research, that as queers, we are really the only subculture that doesn't give birth to the next generation. And so we don't have the advantage of using a kinship system to pass down our culture. So we have to find it other ways. And because of that, the idea of a chosen family has really emerged as part of queer culture. Kath Weston and Heather Murray, who are both queer ethnographers, have also talked about the fact that historically, and for many, many people, and still today, to come out as queer has meant choosing between an authentic life and a life that connects you to your birth family. And that's especially been true for people that don't conform or who don't want to present as traditional genders. So what makes drag families unique in the idea of the chosen family is the fact that it's an identity and it's a community, but it's also an art form, and it's a practice. And because drag is non-text-based, and because for most of its history it's been considered low-brow, the way that drag has sustained itself for however long you define drag as existing, because it's always a complicated question, it's used a kinship system, and it's sustained itself by relationships. And it survived really well, because people have been predicting that drag was on its last legs since Stonewall. It's like it's always the last minute, always it's over, it's nothing relevant anymore, and it just won't fucking die. Like cockroaches. In Canada, we rely a lot on institutions to train the next generation of artists, but theater schools and conservatories aren't teaching drag classes for the most part. You can't go to a library and read 10 important drag monologues for young athletes. You can go to a library and read Esther Newton, and you can go and read Lord Senelik, and you should, and those are really important, but those are written as ethnographies. They're designed to study a culture, and they're not particularly useful for young artists who are trying to learn a craft. And they're not supposed to be, and I'm not diminishing the work they do, it's really important. But one of my kind of issues with academia and drag is that it's very rarely talked about as an art form. It's talked about as a subculture, as a community, as a metaphor for cisgender experience, but talking about it as an art form is very rare, I found. I forgot what people I interviewed. So my youngest interview subject, and also the newest to the drag scene, is Lucy Flawless. Lucy's 23 years old, and she completed York University's Acting Conservatory in 2014. She got interested in drag pretty soon after graduating. She watched YouTube makeup tutorials, she watched a shit ton of Drag Race, and just started doing drag wherever she could. Because of her theater background, that usually meant in plays or in fundraisers, but she had a really hard time breaking into Toronto's nightclub scene. And so, this past spring, Lucy participated in Project Drag Queen, which is kind of an emerging artist training program for drag queens. It was really cool. They ran out of Church on Church, and it was kind of supervised and coached by Vicki Licks and Tracy Aaron Smith, and they brought in weekly queens to talk and kind of mentor the young queens. And Lucy calls Vicki and Tracy her drag foster parents. We discussed how Project Drag Queen compared to her experience in the conservatory, and Flawless explained that despite the generally liberal atmosphere of university theater departments, conservatory training remains really heteronormative. And the ideas we just talked about. The idea that the important thing is producing castable, professionalized actors, and that has a lot to do with embracing being presented normatively, And any kind of gender variation is very discouraged unless you're doing that specific unit on queerness. And that's the time to do it, and then the rest of the time you embrace the way you look. And Lucy out of drag looks like a farm boy. So there was this impetus to always play the kind of like everyman. And so Lucy talked about the difference between straight theater and drag is that, and especially doing Project Drag Queen, she talked about the fact that drag is a really autobiographic art form and it's about self-expression, whereas straight theater, in which he plays the farm boy, is more about pretending to be someone else. And that was a really beautiful irony that we laughed about. So there's a practical training to drag mothers, but there's also a kinship model that's really important. None of my participants actually mentioned being rejected by their families outright, but lots of them talked about needing to withhold certain aspects of their queerness, particularly their professional life, from their families. And even like the most supportive, amazing parents can't be that link to the previous generation of queers because they don't have that generational knowledge the way other cultures might. So some of my queens talked about how they are able to mentor their drag daughters in addition to artistic practice. Fahrenheit and El Noir are both trans women who began transitioning after they started performing. For Fahrenheit, she was attracted to her drag mother. They met at an American pageant. And she was attracted to her mother because she openly identified as trans. With Elle, Elle's mother wasn't trans, but she is often approached by trans drag queens, especially trans drag queens of color in Halifax. And that's often a big part of that relationship. Nora also mentioned that a big part of being a drag mother is connecting her daughters to history. Quote, if you want to do Beyonce every night, but you have no idea who Marsha P. Johnson is, that's a problem. End quote. And because so many styles of drag, and particularly the style of drag that I'm most attracted to, is based on nostalgia, and it's about kind of earlier generations, we can get lulled into this illusion that by going to see this nostalgic play, that counts as a history lesson. And as I say in my longer paper online, knowing all the words to Somewhere Over the Rainbow does not a history lesson make. But it's a really good start, and it is actually a really accessible way. I mean, if you walk into a room full of youth and say the word history lesson, like it's over. But if opening up a playful space of the past and getting people just to think about the fact that there is such a thing as queer history, even if that comes from pop culture, that's a really good start. And what drag mothers are able to do then is supplement those kind of cultural touchstones with actual oral histories. How much time do I have?
You got 1 minute.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Really, really quickly, I want to talk about how drag is changing in Canada in the past decade, largely because of RuPaul's Drag Race. Also, just the explosion of social media. I've heard the phrase, "YouTube is my drag mother" a lot, and that makes a lot of sense. And as an academic, I call myself an academic drag groupie. My fear was that video would kill the radio star. That people would stop seeking out mothers, they would stop seeking out community, and they would sit at home and practice contouring and just memorize every episode of Drag Race, which is exactly what I do. But many of the queens I talked to were actually really invigorated, especially with the audience explosion and how audiences have changed, and there are so many people aspiring to be drag queens. There were also kind of like cautionary tales. Demanda talked about the fact, Demanda started performing 8 years ago, so just before the boom hit, and talked about the fact that when she started, it was acceptable to come to the club with 4 numbers prepared, and now everyone has to do 20. And she called that marathon drag, which I told her I was stealing instantly, and we'll always give her credit for.
That's a Toronto thing, by the way.
Is it?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
Wait, we'll just
It's-
discuss in a second. We're just going to let.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
Finish. Yeah.
Okay, wrapping up. Basically, my theory was that, like, yes, everyone was going to stop seeking out drag mothers, and it's a little early to tell. I only did 5 interviews, but from what I can see, it's not diminishing. And I think that probably has a lot to do with the fact that the kinship system, the desire for community, and this attraction to the past is a lot more important to that relationship than the technical aspects. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. So, a couple topics of interest to me, but we can just bounce around. And that is this fake authenticity spectrum, the constructed nature of gender. And I think that the reason I identify drag as fake, I like to kind of push things, so that was one of my ways of doing it. But also differentiating it from trans identity too. Do you know what I mean? Not trying to pass.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so I think that's one thing. But I think that there are a lot of things about the construction of our identity that come up, and I think that your concept of the body as the stage and using our body as a stage, you know, in all of the examples you talked about, then really you're Cameron to my left. Your invocation of the family and the construction of these you know, familial networks kind of leaks into a very different sort of self-construction as well. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm going to just open it up. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Baron.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I shared yesterday that I'm from flashback, missed flashback, and I learned how to be a gay man through drag. And I learned about family and responsibility. I learned about responsibility as far as performance goes. I learned about showing up, helping others, being kind to those that need it. I wasn't always perfect at all those things, but you know, I did my best. First off, as far as drag being fake, I totally, absolutely disagree with that statement. For me, drag actually can be the most honest thing someone of queer identity can do, because what it does is it takes, it's almost like the authentic higher self that it projects. Somebody who feels ostracized and out of place and out of date and not a part of can put on lipstick, a wig, a pair of shoes, and they suddenly transform into something other than what they ever imagined that they could be, right? So, and as far as the binary, there's so many words in my brain that I don't even know what they all mean all the time, but the appropriation. So as a drag queen of color, so is it that if I do, say, Cyndi Lauper, drag is appropriation, is it not? So your thing about doing that does that mean that if I do Cyndi Lauper, am I allowed to do that anymore? You know, it just. Hell yeah.
But can you explain sort of what you were saying about that? Because you only touched on it for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the person necessarily to talk about appropriation, though I think that's part of the problem. I think, from what I understand from conversations that I've started having, and please everybody else chime in here, like it's different because I'm white and because I am part of I have more privilege approach to be able to take something that might have been really intrinsic to a community that I am not part of and take that, is what I understand. So I mean, I don't really want to.
So I'm sorry, because you just kind of mentioned it, and I'm just wondering, are you hearing feedback when you do your favorite, Aretha Franklin or whatever? Do people give you feedback?
I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't want to be contributing to an oppressive society that is potentially stealing and affecting other people in a negative way. The second half of my paper is, I think, prose is the future of drag, and I think I'm trying to drag myself into the future. I'm trying to educate myself. I didn't think about these things 8 years ago, next year's my 10-year anniversary. I didn't think about these things 10 years ago when I started drag, but I'm starting to think about them now, and I'm wanting to make sure that I'm dragging myself into the future as well, that I'm not just becoming a drag in the past.
Thank you so much. I just want to move on to someone else.
Thanks. I would just like to, I think where we need to be careful with the fake thing, I am late because I was drag shopping. I get amazing opportunities and I work in the mainstream. I'm from Victoria. I get asked to perform at Belfry Theatre with Intrepid Theatre, and I get cast in an musical to play, like as my female character playing a role in a legit thing. I get to do awesome things. I am fake. But a lot of, especially, I'm a man in a dress, I'm a drag queen. But a lot of drag artists, where we have to be careful, I think, is a lot of the young people that I mentor are on their journey to be trans. And this is part of their journey, and they're not fake. And this is, some of them stay in the entertainment field, some of them leave, but it's part of their journey finding their femininity and wearing makeup and dresses. They want to look real. Their whole goal is to look real. And so I think, you know, that to me, there's two sides of the coin here, and I just get so excited when I see like Rose Butch and the different kind of drag that there can be, and want it all to be okay and all to be authentic.
Thank you so much, and I think you bring up a very important point, and I think the way you articulate it as a journey, as on a journey, and I think that's a very important. Jorge, would you like to say something?
Yeah, so I just want to say something really quickly, because I think we shouldn't get too confused about the term fake.
Yeah.
I mean, in the academic world, if we think about Judith Butler, so then and talk about imitation and inversion. So then it's a social construction. It's a whole new big kind of a yarn of wool that it would be very difficult to kind of undo. But I think that it's a very honest performance when we talk about not being fake. Drag is a denaturalization or representation of the gender. So, but then it is fake in the sense that we are still perpetuating this binary. So again, I talk about binary like masculine and feminine. So it is fake in the sense that we're representing. We are in a representational state, but it is real in the sense that, like you're saying, it's a very honest performance. So because we're on stage and we are presenting. So I just wanted to say
Yes,
that.
thank you, Jorge. Antoinette, please.
I'd like
Thank
to
you.
say something because, I'm clothing care expert, but anyways, I had tons of clothes, and out where I was, there's no drag shows or anything, but, we have fun, we play dress up, and the amazing thing is, it's bringing out what you don't see in someone's character. You put on a wig, you put on an outfit, and oh my God, you'd be amazed at the different characters that everybody comes up with, and the drag, the whole thing about the drag, and you have drag, and then you got drag queens, because you could go into a gay club in the 70s, and there'd be 20 people in drag, hard drag, and what have you, but they're not the queens, they're not the ones performing. And it's the theater of the absurd. Is that not real? That's not fake. All you're doing is expressing what's hidden within. You're having fun. You're bringing out things of your own character. And that's not fake.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah, I don't disagree
I
at
just-
all.
I
I think in a way it takes us back to our conversation a few days ago about the queer real and fiction's relationship to identity and the real. And as theater artists, that we have to be, that we're aware, that we are aware of the spectrum and all of the potential of performing. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And it's changed from the past,
Yeah.
where it was, everybody was just so excited because they could express themselves in a safe environment, And now things have changed a lot, and like you say, I'm transgender, well, I'm not really, I'm intersex, but, I get red as trans. But I was, and I get a lot of friends that say, well, why don't you do drag? Because the outfits and the stuff I dress up in is, well, because I want to do my poetry, I want to sing.
Yeah, that's great.
And that was one thing that I wasn't included in, yet I knew all the queens, and they were friends and they were community, and so I was a prostitute on the street, and you need your moms and your family because you need to learn, you need to be educated, what to do, and to stay safe. And if you're performing, you need to have somebody just give you the ins and outs, and that's generally who is your mentor, and that's your mom.
Thank you very much, Antoinette. Tony, would you like to ask a question?
Well, yeah, I want to comment on what Jorge said. I thought you said some really profound things about how drag informs masculinity. And this is something I found, because I used to like to say, I've never done drag in my life, except for the first 25 years of my life. When I realized, and it was through understanding and going into drag and understanding the ideas that later got solidified in Butler, which sort of laid it out all for us, but this was in the 80s, and going, oh my God, I've been attempting to perform this kind of heteronormative masculinity all my life, and it's made me incredibly uncomfortable. And so that was a kind of drag that I was doing in that, and it goes to a fakery. I'm doing something that is not from within, perhaps, or I'm doing something that reads as fake, that you can see the artifice in what I was doing. And then after that, yeah, and then now, I mean, I don't consider myself masculine or effeminate, but I'm performing my own masculinity, or you can call it my own femininity, whatever. I don't like how those terms, because they go to these constructs of gender, but I'm performing my own, I don't know, what do you want to call it, sexual self.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's the really great thing about drag, is it helps us understand the problems with masculinity as well as these huge
Do you have a
problems.
question, or?
No, I just wanted to comment. I think that's really, there's so much more in that about the masculinity that you were alluding to there.
And not that I don't appreciate comments, I'm just trying to keep it, do you know what I mean? So like, thank you so much, yeah. Brad, did you want to
I'm
speak?
wondering about the emissarial role of the drag queen. You know, when you first go to a gay club, almost the first people who talk to you and make it less frightening are drag queens. And groups like Guys in Disguise out of Edmonton and the Great Imposters in Toronto and various groups, they go out and they would tour these horrible small town bars. I mean, Rusty Ryan had hilarious stories about working in these places. And they are, for me, kind of the cosmonauts or whatever from the queer community who first went out into the real world and tried to find a way to bridge that. And I'm wondering, especially you, Cameron, if you're looking at your history and that kind of thing, if you've been looking at that, the effect of drag queens going out into other communities and what the reaction has been to that. Because it seems to me it's an important role.
I've not looked at that. That's really interesting. That's something I can think about. Like, I've definitely, from a historical point of view, just the idea that, like, I define drag as kind of starting in the late 1700s, and there's a lot of start dates you can put on drag. But really, as soon as psychologists start inventing homosexuality, it's a link to drag instantly. So it's got this, even though the concept of sexuality has changed so much in the last 200 years, men performing in dresses has been attached to that. So I think there is something about being the visual symbol of queer culture that I think, I think that's part of it.
Cameron, you wanted to?
Couple things. Let's touch on that first. I've always said that I think drag, a drag performer is part clown, part foot soldier for the community. Peach and I do a drag history show where we actually go into a community and interview in advance some performers, and then we do a live talk show where they come out and perform, and we talk about their placement in history. And yeah, we start at the Big Bang, and we just queer the Big Bang. It's all that glitter and lights and shiny things. It's gotta be a drag queen. And actually, Rose, we've been going out. Peach and I have been going out to Campbell River. For those of you who are from BC, it's like the middle of Vancouver Island, and it's super rural and super small town. And we started going out about 4 years ago and they were doing a Halloween Rocky Horror Show screening, and we were there to be the queens. And there were so many straight people in the audience dressed up because they were allowed to be, as you were saying, like they had the space to do it. And now we've been going back, and they've done Pride there for the last 2 years. We just took Rose with us this past summer, and we did Campbell River Pride, and people are super open to it, and they're really receptive, and it is that, as you said, going into these small towns and being.
Would you articulate why you think that's different than a bunch of gay muscle men showing up in Speedos as opposed to men dressed as women? Like how that changes or affects the reaction?
What I thought was interesting when we were in Campbell River is that there were so many, like I think last year it was 19 plus at the venue, but this year it was open, it was all ages, and there were so many queer youth, and there were so many trans youth, and I was like, oh my God, you need this in Campbell River, and like it's maybe we're affecting some kind of change by being here, and you can see like this, and you can see what you could be, like the possibility. So I thought
And there was two drag queens, a drag thing, and a drag king.
Yeah.
So it was a really nice sort of cross section of all of us. What was that? That's
I think Jorge was going to.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a little bit of what you asked and what he said. So I think it is embedded in our nature and in history too, through the carnavalesque, when we have this need to invert the rules, to go to the opposite, so then to try to get out of what the norm is. And then we have done it through history, in medieval times, when everybody goes and then drags the country, drags the city, drags the family, and then we all dress in women's clothes and men dress, and they all fucked outside, and then it's naked. And then it's part of our nature. So drag is embedded in our bodies, in our space, and in theatricality of the world. So then it's not just that we invented drag by just putting high heels. So it's been there all the time.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good point. Dara had her hand up, and then I'll come to you after Sila.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that as we move to sort of problematize racial appropriations and drag, I think it's important to continue to problematize the fact that music, all the music, was effectively stolen from Black people in this continent, maybe beyond this continent, and white performers of pop music today are taking the songs and the traditions and the beats that were invented by Black folk, throughout history. And, drag is at least I see it, it's definitely theatrical, but it's also a musical performance, right? So, just to think about the history of music when we talk
It's
about
also satire, right? It's also satirical in the way it's addressing those things.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that at all, or before I move on? No, good.
I think one of the response to Brad's question is that I think we actually did in terms of the
Oh, okay. I thought you did.
the
I'm
muscle
sorry,
man
Cameron. I thought you had.
versus the drag queens coming in, and I think for myself,
back.
I was always clocked as gay. I remember being 5 at school and being called gay, and I didn't really necessarily understand what that meant. I've never been able to hide my sexuality, whereas I think some of the more muscular butch men and speedos who got the choice to come out a little bit later in their 20s and 30s, and they choose to sort of present in the world in a certain way. So for me, being a queen ties into that taking my femininity and owning that and going, yes, I am queer, and I'm here, and I've been queer my entire life, and people have been looking at me, and so I've dealt with that kind of homophobia for so long that I'm a good representative for the community of, let's heal together and let's make some change together.
Celie, I'll come back to you. I just want to give other people. Celie, and then we'll do Miriam. I haven't looked at this side of the room. You guys okay? You're okay over there? Okay. You got one too. Okay, and then we'll come back to you, Antoinette, okay? Okay, great. So we're going to go Celie, Miriam, you. What's your name since we're on a first name basis? Casey, okay, and then we'll come back to Antoinette. Oh, and then Dave. Oh, thank you. Okay, and then okay, great. We got 5, and that'll probably wrap us up. But it's super exciting place to talk about identity, isn't it? It really starts a conversation. So thanks, everybody. Celie.
I have a no kind of question. First, just to kind of spring from something Brad mentioned about often in the role of emissaries, drag queens in a bar space that you come into. I analyze that as connected to gender inflection, meaning femme as a gender expression is so often who is doing this labor, right, of welcoming activity, right? And I also just want to note that, I see an enormous amount of femme leadership within this overall conference atmosphere. Not saying that there's not butch leadership, there's a spectrum and all, it's great, but I want to give props to there's a lot of amazing leadership happening here, so noting that. My question is, also you just mentioned satire, and mine is about humor, right? I feel like drag performances, not exclusively, but so often hinge on some kind of invocation of humor. There's some kind of comedic edge. And that can get really tricky, right? Because so much of the range of what people in our larger society are able to make humor about ends up being at the expense of somebody. You know, sometimes there's a choice to make like a self-satirical thing, but if one is performing a gender expression, that can involve misogyny, misandry, like different, like humor that has this negative tone. And that is something that has personally turned me off from getting into drag from some years back, and I have not kept up with what are innovations and how are people maybe challenging that. And like, I know that there are moments that people perform drag acts that go to a serious place rather than emphasizing humor, but those are like the odd one, you know, that goes into some kind of different performative territory and does or doesn't succeed, you know, depending on what's evoked there. So I guess my question is, how are you seeing current choices in your respective communities regarding the use of humor or satire, perhaps, in a drag scenario? How is that working? Is it like, do you feel a need to shift what is presented in order to maybe de-emphasize dismissing or humor that is oppressing particular folks?
Does anybody want to talk to that?
I'm not sure if I can like answer that. Like, I'm gonna try to answer that. When I read Jorge's paper talking about like masculine capital, I immediately thought of I've got a couple of performers from the drag show that I come from. It's called Man Up. So Man Up is it's 8 years old. It's an 8-year-long queer dance party / drag show, and it started out as a drag king show, but has in recent years become more of a like gender diverse cabaret. There's burlesque, there's contortion, drag kings, drag queens, drag things, and there is a couple of performers called the Brokeback Brothers, and they're and they're drag kings. They're married in real life, and their shtick is that they are lampooning masculinity with every number that they do. And like one particular number that's coming to mind is like they do a number to Cream by Prince where they kind of poke fun at cruising culture, and they have like a cum rag that's like a skipping rope, and they're like, it's hilarious. So I mean, there's that kind of like, but they always do it through a critical lens of like, well, we're not doing this at the expense of gay men. Hopefully, I should hope, but it's all in good fun, and that's the satire that they're bringing, is that like the jock is secretly, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but yeah, that's what I thought of in your paper, and I think that that's happening as well, but there is still satire, and that's satire through like a drag king lens, not just satire through like a queen lens. So that's what I have to offer.
Oh, did you want to
If I could just be
address that?
obnoxiously academic for like 5 seconds.
Please.
I think, Brad, you offered the word satire, and lots of drag is satirical, but Linda Hutchin talked about the difference between satire and parody, and I would say, in my experience, the queens that I work with and study and go see, it is a lot closer to parody than satire. The difference being, satire has kind of a wagging finger or a moral or some kind of critical endgame, whereas parody is really any intertextual relationship. Wicked is a parody because it's taking kind of two different forms or two different texts and putting them together. And it's hard to speak for drag because it's such a big umbrella. But I know a lot of queens, it's more about expressing something inner than parodying other. So a lot of the times I do find that the humor, because drag is all about humor most of the time, can often be like kind of self-deprecating, but isn't necessarily coming from an intentionally misogynistic place because the performer is identifying with the jokes themselves as opposed to seeing it as a masculine being kind of denigrating femininity. That would be my answer for that.
I just have to stay in my order. I'll come back to you. Miriam?
Yeah, I mean, I think Celia maybe articulated what I wanted to ask, but much better. But it was that thing about how we so rarely will talk about appropriation and you know, lines that you mustn't cross when it comes to racial appropriation. But it's true that we hardly ever talk about that intrinsic, sometimes the misogyny in drag. And I find that just kind of interesting. It's like a bit of a sacred cow.
And how close to the object of woman always is, you know, talking about Jorge bringing up the examples of how to humiliate someone is to put them in female garb, right? That is a tradition that, you know, kind of runs
and I'm curious
through
why,
many cultures.
in Montreal, the drag at Mado is like the major audience are bachelorettes from the suburbs, bachelorette parties from the suburbs, and I'm curious about that, you know? What?
There's a bar in Toronto that is exactly that. It's been co-opted by bachelorette parties.
Katie, you're up.
I was actually going to bring up almost the exact same thing about the
humor
and that, and just the interesting thing of it being. It seems to me that it's a lot more easy to make like the humor and the appropriation towards people in feminine, portraying femininity than it is towards drag kings, which is an interesting thing I noticed. Anyway, it's all been said much more eloquently than I have.
You sure? You're good? Yeah. Dave?
Well, this is sort of dialing back to something that Rowdy brought up that I just would like to explore a bit further. Just the notion of drag performers, in my personal experience, like drag queens sort of as almost like, you know, the maitre d' of the bar, like the greeter who makes you feel, who sort of opens up the possibility of comfort and community. And is that specific to drag? Like, can the same experience happen through like the muscle guy in the Speedo, as Brad calls it? And I actually, especially in the small town context, I actually sort of wondered about, like, there's a certain performative permission in drag that, and in a small town context, I do think it's that suddenly the femininity of the gay man lines up with the actual gender presentation and is thus less threatening. Because like the feminine, like the faggy gay guy to a straight guy in a context where that might be actually quite hostile, like is sort of, the drag lens actually softens that in a really fascinating and kind of problematic way. And I just wondered, like, just because I spend 2 or 3 days a week in drag, and we experience this a lot, like that. Drag as a fascinating gateway to, strangely, like a safer interaction with potentially like a non-queer crowd. Because we do a lot of drag in non-queer spaces for, in some cases, like super non-queer audiences. And I wonder if, Cam, you want to speak to that, or just the notion of drag as sort of a bit of a more comfortable or perhaps palatable femininity for a non-queer audience.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I'm sure everybody else can as well jump in. react differently to us than if I just went up to somebody as myself and said, oh, welcome to this bar. And it ties into Celia, your question around like, you know, what are you doing to not necessarily use some of that negative stuff in your humor. And certainly for Peach and I, building community is the most exciting thing. And so a tactic that I know both Peach and I do is we do turn any like deprecating humor inward on ourselves. Most of my numbers, I don't actually parody the numbers. I don't actually sort of turn them into like handy sort of performances. My goal is to bring out the most authentic representation of the sound of that song in my own body. And then I go into the comedy when I'm actually talking and hosting the show. And so trying to link these two in a kind of weird way, I'm sorry. To be the MC, to be the host in order to make somebody feel easier. Yeah, I have experienced that where straight men are more actually protective of me in a really problematic way as well, right? Like because I'm presenting as female in these smaller communities where they go into that weird masculine thing, and it's problematic, but it also I'm able to access them on a different level.
Yeah, I think Jorge wanted
Yeah,
to
just
respond as well.
my little answer is a very personal opinion towards this, how it is so easy to go to small communities and just present yourself as a drag queen and not being so threatening to the community or them being threatening to you. Because I think it's the trivialization of gender through the media. So RuPaul made it easy for all of us just to be in drag and walk around and take the subway because it's just so common just to see it on TV. So then we're not threatening. It hasn't become, it disappeared as a strategy for resistance. So then now we're just one more, like, sorry, I don't want to be offensive with anybody, we're one more clown from TV. So and that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
So that's why we're not threatening to anybody anymore.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Alexander Chapman, who appeared in a lot of John Grayson movies, I once said to me that, he said, in 1980, when you put on a skirt, you meant it. You know? It's like, you were taking on something, and you were gonna, Katie, you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I appreciated what Cole Alvis said the other day about not speaking about decolonization, and it's not going to happen, and it's not possible. And so I think about the dialogue surrounding cultural appropriation. I also, that something that I think is often left out of it is that decolonization is not possible, so intercommunity and intercultural bridge building is possible. And I think there's a difference between cultural appropriation and cultural identification, and identifying in something in a culture that is not yours, but in which you find kinship and resilience and strength. And so last week I was in Halifax, and I was at a drag bar, and they introduced what they called wild queens and her bio queens. So these were cisgendered women who were doing heightened female drag, and they were introduced alongside with the drag queens, and they were part of the same families. And I'd never seen anything like that, and I wanted to ask the panel what they felt about that in view of is that an act of appropriation? Is that straight people taking their drag? And I don't think that it is, but I wanted to ask people who know much more about that. Progress.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. So I have a drag mother, and recently, there was a recent conversation about a video that went around called Lady Drag that was exploring a similar thing, like cis women doing drag as drag queens. And then the question of like, well, is this really drag? If like cis women can do queen drag, then when does is it just open for everybody? Is it just fair game for everyone now? And like who gets what? And, that sort of thing. And I didn't really participate in that discussion because it was fairly intense. But the way I feel about it, first of all, I have a personal issue with the term bio queen, because what the fuck is bio? What does that mean? What's biological gender, biological, like, forget that.
Yeah.
So like a drag queen is a drag queen is a drag queen.
Yeah.
That's what I think about that. So I also feel like I don't think it's appropriative. I think if you want to do drag, if you're committed to doing drag, then do it. There is a king in our community who is a cis straight woman who does drag, the drag king. And there are some folks who have an issue with that because they see that as, like holidaying with the homos, but you're not actually living the life. But this person is a part of the community, and this person is a really great ally, and I don't see any problem with that, and I don't see it as appropriation. I think if you want to be a part of the community, if you're committed to drag as an art form, then just do it.
I think it's kind of similar to the question of like, what happens when an army of bachelorettes come to take up space in a gay bar? And I remember being at Tangos, and we were surrounded by screaming bachelorette party fails. And I made some comment of fucking straight girls, and I was with my straight friend, who is an ally and has done tons of work and lives in the village. And I think it's a fine point, the difference between an ally and a tourist. So rather than painting with a broad brush who can do what, it really is an individual basis. Like, are you committed to the community, or is this like, ooh, this is different? Or are you really living here?
Yeah.
I don't even necessarily think they have to be committed to the community. I think you're right. If you're gonna do like drag is drag, king, queen, and thing. And if you're gonna do it well, then do it. And if you are performing in whatever way you want to, but you're doing it really passionately, you're going to affect somebody. I don't necessarily need you to even know, for myself speaking, I don't need you to know about our struggles and about Stonewall and stuff. If you're simply going to be a performer who heightens whatever you want to heighten, then as long as you're doing it well, then by all means, join the party.
But isn't it also always already drag? I mean, women aren't born in high heels, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. You want to learn how to walk in those fuckers, right? Sorry, Antoinette, I'm not deliberately ignoring you. I'm just giving everybody a chance because you've had one question, so I'm coming back. I see you there. No, wait. You and then Scott. Yeah.
I wanted to just speak a little to the question of cultural appropriation. I mean, I can't claim at all to speak about white on black appropriation. I can speak a little bit from my experience as an often white passing mixed race Asian European, and I think when we talk about that, there's a history of white people performing other races that no matter what the intentions are, and no matter what the personal context is, because there's a lot of triggering that can happen around that, and it's not necessarily things all just like way in the past. I mean, we've been seeing, for example, a lot of statistics coming around recently about representations of Asians in theater and in movies, and how big a representation of Asians are in the population, and 3%, the 3% of the cast in Hollywood movies are Asian when you get Scarlett Johansson playing an Asian woman, etc. There's a lot of, so it's mixed in with a lack of opportunity that's often felt from POC communities, and then they see roles that could have been theirs taken by white people who they perceive as having more opportunity. And then there's also this long history of parody that comes in those, so that it's not just Scarlett Johansson playing an Asian woman, but it's the Mikado, or it's at its worst, Andy Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's. So each individual performance comes all mixed up in this context. So I think some of the reaction that you get, Cameron, is not about you as a person, is not about your act specifically. It's about this, it's about this wound that it touches on, regardless of what your intentions are. And I think it's complicated. I think drag complicates it all the more because part of it is this question of taking archetypes, whether they're gender archetypes or whatever, and heightening them to the point where we see them as being, as drag, something that is put on, and not necessarily, where we understand that gender is something that we create, not as something that we just are born with. And in a lot of ways, race is also something that's been created. It's not something that we're born with. We're all, we're a human race, and yet we're divided among all of this. So it's not, I feel like there's, I just felt like I needed to speak a little bit to that, which is not to say, I think you shouldn't be doing this. It's just when I look at it, something in me that feels a little bit uncomfortable, and I don't know what to do with it.
Things have changed. You know, never used to be. The gay community, anything goes. You could do whatever you want. You had that freedom, and there was diversity. There wasn't this alienation because you were all together. The lesbians, you know, they were just next door, and they were part of the community. But when HIV hit, boom, everything changed. The diversity. And now, myself, as a transgender, the older queens, like I'm talking about years ago, there were 6, by the world in the underground, and they go to Europe. They kept trying to tell me, why don't you take the female clothes off? Because of the adversity, you see, that I faced, you know, at that time. And that's the whole thing, when you're putting on drag, it's sort of, you know, you're free to, because of all of the adversity and the discrimination that you've been experiencing as a gay person, now you can get it out, and it's all of the stuff that's in it, it's free, and you can do it. Nobody's gonna give you any opinions or be offended. They know it's a show. And the audience was filled with other people in drag. But transgender people, when they finally get support from the medical community, has complicated everything now, because people get confused between drag and, you know, what happens. So that is complicated. So moving into the future, or what's coming, I think the way is trying to get this community back to where it once was, where you were free, where everybody's included in the community, and trying to address everything, because, you know, there was natives, blacks, and everything, and you're all together.
Antoinette, thank you so much for your input. I'm just going to move on because I've got to keep moving, but thank you so much for your thoughts. Just a touch.
I have to be very careful because I am triggered, and I have no problem being triggered, but I'm very triggered by it, so I'll just say that as an advance warning, a trigger warning, that by people who say that drag is misogyny in drag. So I think it's important, really important. First of all, I think it's important to read Judith Butler, and maybe people have said Judith Butler is irrelevant now, but for me, it is a very important topic. It really does explain to people why drag is, it shouldn't say turn, she really does explain it. There's explain why drag is not misogynistic. But I would say the reason why it's not misogynistic is because if you say it's misogynistic, then you're going with a very gender binary view, because you're suggesting that women are feminine and own femininity, and men are masculine and own masculinity. It's very old-fashioned, it's very destructive gender binary, which we know we're kind of fighting against. What these drag queens are, and Cameron expressed it, and it's very true, find me a drag queen who is a masculine guy who has trouble being feminine. Almost all drag queens are feminine. They are feminine. They're feminine. When they were little kids, someone said, are you a fag? They are always feminine. They talk, my thing was, why do you talk with your hands so much? They live with being feminine inside of what was born biologically labeled male body their whole life. And they're expressing something that is in them. Women don't own femininity. Women aren't, men are feminine. Women are masculine. Well, I know women, some women who don't have an ounce of femininity in them. They're biologically born women. They're not the least bit feminine. As you said, women are not born wearing high heels, right? So I just think it's important, in my opinion, I'll stop being so passionate because I get triggered, but it just seems to me that it's important to recognize that all these guys who do drag are expressing something in themselves that is in them, and they're not appropriating a woman, and they're not making fun of women. I have seen misogyny in drag because it's everywhere. Drag queens don't own it. Women can be misogynistic. They can use the B word. Straight men are very misogynistic. Hopefully they won't get offended if I say that, but they're very misogynistic. But drag queens, yeah, it's misogynistic sometimes. But there's nothing misogynistic about the act of drag, in my view.
How's everybody doing? Okay? Yeah, you're good? Okay, you're good. Anybody need a hug?
hug or anything? It's been a lot of more hugging around lately. Thank you so much. Do you have anything you need to say before we wrap this up? That was a really stimulating conversation. Thank you so much. End of another day. Everybody go and relax. But before we do that, I just want to give a shout out to Katrina, who is giving we're so tired at the end of the day. She doesn't take a break. Have you noticed? the shock of blue hair, just constantly laboring. So thank you very much for your work, your important work.
I did actually just want to say thank you to everybody for your honesty and for your have these conversations with us.
Such a good one. Thank you.
And before everybody goes, Catherine is the last 30 minutes at the book table. She said she had talked to some people who said they were coming back for things. That's why she's waited. So if you want books, you have to go see her now. And also to help us for tonight, if you could put the chairs back into rows for, I don't know what exact configuration of these meant, but I'm imagining